And good morning. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. Should be a fun show today. I have a very articulate candidate that I definitely support. I can't say that about everybody that comes on. I generally bring on people that I like and want to highlight their good side. Nonetheless, I think that we need to pay attention to local. That if we change our local communities, then those are the future leaders that can change our state. So we need to put out any fires or find somebody, because I'm currently sitting in Fresno, find somebody besides Gary, some support for Gary to help him out on the Fresno City Council. But today we're dealing with the Clovis City Council, which isn't in quite the same mess, thank goodness.
Right.
Before we get there, before I introduce my guest, I do have two events, two opportunities to go out and get involved. They're both on a Saturday. The first one is Saturday, October 1st. That is the Great American Freedom Revival. That is from 11 to 4 at Bicentennial Park. There'll be speakers, including the infamous or famous Guillermo Moreno. There'll be various local groups there that believe in freedom. There'll be a band, food trucks, games for the kids. Some of the games will include teaching kids about the Constitution. So should be a fun event. I'll be there. I hope to get to meet you there. The next one is also a Saturday, October 15th. That is the Dala Monthly fundraiser. It is going to be a USO theme. The Dala Monthly is a local Kingsburg paper. It has a conservative slant, though they try to be fair because they truly believe in freedom, which means sometimes they have somebody that has an article or an opinion that isn't conservative because they're trying to be fair. I think that media's lost that. So this is kind of a little hidden gem. They now have about 8,000 distribution. It's only been up for less than a year. That is at the Kingsburg Historic Park from 5 to 9 p.m. Saturday, October 15th. There'll be a band. Last time dinner was great. There's a casino. There's a raffle. It's just a fun time. You can tour. If you come early at 5, there's docent tours of the little museum, so you get some local history. I'll also be there. If you're interested in tickets, that one, you go to thedolamonthly.com, or a lot of my viewers know me personally. I try to always have some tickets in my pocket. They are $60, but I think well worth the money, and it is a tax-deductible write-off because it is a nonprofit. I think we're ready to roll. Diane, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So what are you running for?
I am running for Clovis City Council. Yeah, you said how Clovis isn't in the shape that Fresno is, but that's only because we continue to elect good public service minded people who genuinely have the best interests of Clovis at heart. And I've told people before that it's really hard to look at the Fresno City Council right now and realize that just 6 short years ago in 2016, there were 3 Republicans on the 7-member council, and they actually had a 4-3 pro-business voting majority. And you realize that in just a couple of campaign cycles where they are now, it really matters who you vote for. Elections have consequences. And unfortunately in Fresno, it's gone a very unfortunate direction, but Clovis has the same opportunity to vote wisely and fail, because, we see that in a 5-member council, you only need 3 people to vote a different way, and it can change the entire trajectory of the community. And there are 3 seats up right now, 1 incumbent running and 2 what you might call open seats because it's all at large. And so
just explain at large very briefly.
So most people understand that in Fresno, there are 7 districts and 1 representative, 1 council member represents each district. In Clovis, there are 5 council members, but each council member represents the entire city. So there's no geographic districts in Clovis. So the good thing about that means that each council member has to be accountable and responsible to every single neighborhood, every single constituent. And so that means that there'll be 10 names on the ballot. The top 3 vote getters get the 3 council seats.
As far as I can tell, there's what, 10 people
There's
running?
10 names on the ballot.
I like 4 of them. I think I've picked my 3.
Mhm.
You're top of my list.
Thank you very much.
So, folks, I'm actually endorsing Diane.
Thank you.
Whether that means much, but so why are you doing this?
You know, there's a lot of good reasons to jump into the fray. One of the reasons that I'm doing it, frankly, is because I did it just a year and a half ago. And so there was already a lot of support and momentum. And it really felt like I was just picking up where I left off. I didn't anticipate this coming. I kind of thought I'd done that. And, you know, we'll figure out other ways to be involved and to serve. But then it came up with 2, what we'll call open seats, because there's no incumbent running. And it, like I say, it just felt like, okay, we're going to keep this going. And when you hear people say things like, I kept your yard sign from last time, just let me know when I can put it back out. Exactly.
I'm one of those.
You just kind of feel that the opportunity is there. This is the chance that I get to serve people. And a lot of the same issues that got me involved last time still exist. The main reason I jumped in last time, it was in the middle of the pandemic. And I realized that of the 5-member council, no one was self-employed. So all of these decisions that impacted our businesses, that shut down businesses, no one on the council was directly impacted by those decisions. And I believe that diversity of experience is important. And I think there's a perspective, a unique problem-solving component to being a business owner, a small business owner, that I think will be really valuable on the council. As far as this particular round goes, there's other challenges that have come about. Some of them have roots in the pandemic, or at least were exacerbated by some of those issues. And that's like public safety. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch for anybody to understand that the absolute top priority of an elected official of any kind of government entity has to be the safety of the citizens.
So fire, police, emergency services.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the key there is that if you aren't safe in your homes, if your businesses aren't safe, if your kids aren't safe at school, does any of the rest of it matter? No, it really doesn't. And so we have to start there.
I want to tie that together with the fact that Clovis did something very different than Fresno. I was there. I spoke at the May 8th meeting in 2020. 4 of the council members voted to support business, to essentially get out of the way and allow us to get back to work.
Right.
And then one of them absolutely wanted to give away our freedom.
Right.
Not a fan of that person. I'm not going to even say anything more than that, just not a fan. But if they hadn't, Clovis was not big enough to get very much of the CARES Act money. And being able to maintain safety has to do with having money consistently coming into the city coffers, because a huge percentage of the budget goes to those emergency services.
You know, and that's the challenge too, is because the public safety, police and fire get the lion's share of the budget money that is disposable. So you have what's called the general fund, and that is all the money that has council discretion over exactly how it's allocated. There's other aspects of it that kind of generate their own funds, and so the council doesn't really have say over that. So like you pay your water bill, right? That doesn't go into the general fund. That goes into a separate account. And so when you already have public safety taking so much of that, it's really difficult to look at those other pieces of the pie and try to discern the best allocation for all the funds. But that's why it's so critical who we have there, because again, all of these other decisions impact other aspects too. So decisions about keeping our businesses open impact public safety budgets. And so to have that understanding of the big picture is really, really important. And that council meeting that you referenced was the one that got me to jump into the race last time. Because when you hear, and again, you only need 3 people to think that way, and the whole community will suffer for that. And so that's why I jumped in last time. And again, those same kinds of concepts still exist, because it's still a tenuous balance when you only need 3 people on a 5-member council to be supporting the values and the positions that are best for our community.
Well, four of the council members actually spoke up, gave their reasoning,
right,
and voted to reopen.
Mm-hmm.
The other one refused to even give the reasoning.
Right.
That was the part that was unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
If you truly believe that we shouldn't have reopened, you, as the most important decision you made all year,
Mm-hmm.
had an obligation as a public servant, notice I use the word servant,
Mm-hmm.
to tell us why.
You know, and that was so difficult, is when people are governing out of fear, you're not going to get the best results.
No.
You have to be able to operate with sober judgment and set things aside, set whatever your personal business entanglements may be. If you're coming from healthcare, I understand that was a crazier industry to be coming from and confronting these issues, but that's not who you're supposed to be when you're on the dais, when you're representing the community members. I see it as an executive in a sense where, and that's kind of the business background, where you assemble all the experts from all the different fields, from healthcare, from public safety, from business, from schools. We want to know the impacts on all of the different aspects of the community. You come, I seek out all of the expert opinions, but then as the council member, as the representative of the people, I have to distill all of that information and give it different weights and then come to what I believe is the decision in the best interest of the community.
Absolutely.
And I think
I wish I could have said it that well.
Well, that's really what was missing, I felt, through the pandemic, was that kind of leadership.
Well, they didn't have the same pressures.
No, everybody got so focused on the public health, and not that that wasn't important. It just wasn't the only thing that existed. Other things didn't just stop happening and stop existing. We still needed to be aware of the business ramifications. We still needed to be paying attention to our children. And it took...
And mental health.
Exactly. It took so long before the grassroots of all of that, the parents seeing what's going on in the classrooms, seeing how their kids are reacting to these situations, were galvanized and got involved. And that's not to shame them at all. I'm glad that it happened that way. It's just, it takes a while to get all of that ramped up. And that's why we needed to be able to rely on our leaders to take us that step at the beginning, but they didn't.
I see COVID as this great awakening.
Mm-hmm. It is, absolutely.
Was it a curse? Yes. At the same time, was it the greatest blessing?
Mm-hmm.
Because we were slowly losing our freedoms and people were not involved. And I think it shook a lot of people out of that. We still need to shake more people out because you look at voting numbers. And for instance, in your race, wasn't it like 16% of registered voters?
Well, so last cycle was what they call off cycle.
Right.
So the election was in March. And so those are always depressed numbers. And so that particular one did see higher numbers. Usually they were around 15%. I think they were pushing 20% voter turnout for that one. So it did increase some, but it's still woefully under the actual number of registered voters.
Well, people want to see one big leader that'll solve everything.
Yeah.
And that's just not how reality works.
No.
Local's what matters. They make most of the decisions that affect your everyday life.
Right.
Whether you have a cop there or a fireman there that will get there on time.
Yeah.
With somebody there to deal with the homeless. And that's a very real problem.
A very real problem. Even in Clovis. People think that it isn't in Clovis, but it's there.
So what do we do about that one?
So I actually, on my Facebook page, if you want to find it, it's facebook.com/Diane4Clovis. And I just posted within the last week kind of my ideas on how to deal with it. And there's multiple steps to it. But number one is you have to have political will and a backbone, because what we see so often is the first time you're called a name, it hurts so bad that, you fold like a cheap suit, and nobody wants that. Well, the truth is, I think we've come to a better place as a society and a community, and people, through these conversations and being willing to deal with the hard truths of it, recognize that leaving people in the street is not compassion.
No.
Compassion is recognizing that that person needs help and making sure they get it, whether they're capable of recognizing that for themselves or not. And so in Clovis, it's beginning to be a problem. Old Town Clovis, as you know, a lot of the business owners see it, and they need it to be addressed. There are certain neighborhoods that have it more rampant than others, and it's absolutely unacceptable. It's unacceptable for our neighbors, it's unacceptable for our businesses, and it's unacceptable for those people who are struggling with these issues. So the first thing I do is separate them out into groups. There's so many different people that we lump into the homeless, right? So there are some people that are just genuinely down on their luck. Temporary situations have put them in a bad place. They need some assistance. There's lots of different organizations that have that available to them. We need to make sure they get to that. But then you also have the people, of course, who are dealing with mental health issues, who have addiction issues.
And they're almost always together.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing a lot,
Yeah.
right? So by and large, the services that are available to those people for treatment are in Fresno. Places like Map Point at the Poverello House, City Center, or the Mission, the Rescue Mission. Their services are tailored to identifying the specific problems, getting those people the treatment they need. But the biggest obstacle we've had to that has been the idea of involuntary commitment. We think these people should have to accept the help that they desperately need, or the government's just going to put a roof over their head. And I tell people, it's like, look, when you're out on the street and you see that individual who is clearly out of their mind, screaming at the sky, whatever, the last thing that crosses my mind is, if he or she only had a roof over their head, that's clearly not their problem. And so we actually have to have the genuine compassion to take that person and get them the help they need. Again, whether they recognize they need it or not. But then aside from those people who need serious help, you have the criminal vagrants and you have the people who just prefer and choose that lifestyle and call themselves urban campers. Basically, that's the point where you need the political will to say, this isn't the place for you. We're not going to make this a hospitable environment for you to come and do this and affect the quality of life for our residents, for our families, for our businesses. You're not going to be able to overrun our parks. You're not going to be able to do these things. This is not the place for you. Maybe there's some other jurisdiction that will allow you to behave this way. We're going to make sure you find that one instead.
I bought my house just about 4 years ago, and I live near the Fresno-Clovis border, but I'm in Clovis. 4 years ago, homeless were not the same level of problem.
Right.
And it has definitely shifted. It used to be that they'd come over to Clovis, to some of the nearby businesses, because I live relatively close to some businesses during the day, and they'd leave at night. They don't anymore.
Right.
They just walk right across Willow, and they don't anymore. They're there. I go out for a walk at night, and I feel like in some areas, and I can handle my business, but I have to actually watch what's going on, because some of them are just plain crazy. And I've called Clovis PD. Now, the good part is Clovis PD shows up. Right.
And that's the key, too. When you're talking about public safety, one of the biggest challenges, of course, is the state we live in. It's insane. And the laws that are passed out of Sacramento are absolutely bonkers, right? I mean, it's a ridiculous situation. But at the local level, we know that police presence deters crime. I can't handle what happens after that point. I can't force them to stay incarcerated. I can't, keep them from being let out or any of that. We know there's a revolving door, and our police officers are encountering the same offenders over and over and over again because of Props 4757 and all those things we talk about all the time, right? But at the same time, if you're talking about protecting your community, the fact that having enough officers to be on patrol will make your community safer. That has nothing to do with Sacramento. That has to do with local government making sure that public safety is fully funded.
Well, we desperately need that. We're going to go ahead and take a break.
Absolutely.
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to all those people on social media. If you like what I'm doing, please like, please subscribe. This has been a fun journey. We're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to go ahead and shift gears and talk a little bit about schools. I realize the City Council does not directly deal with schools, but your support and your input, I think, would be listened to by a lot of the Clovis School Board.
I actually think there needs to be more communication between our branches of government and the different entities in that, because one of the things I heard a lot during the pandemic were elected officials saying things along the lines of, that's not my jurisdiction, right? Well, the truth is, if I'm elected as a council member, don't I represent families? Don't I represent parents and by extension the students? And so why wouldn't I want to be supportive of their interests and what's best for them, even as it pertains to the school district, as it pertains to the Board of Trustees? And I think that being supportive of other elected officials, even in other areas, is key to really having that unified community. And if we're looking to support conservative principles, conservative values, that doesn't end for me at City Hall. That absolutely extends into all facets of the life of the community and the people I represent.
Well, having been to 22 Clovis school board meetings in the last 2 years, haven't made the last several, just I'm busy.
Yeah.
but I've made a bunch. I've never once seen a Clovis City Council member at a school board meeting.
Isn't that interesting?
Never once.
Right.
That during a very key time. I also know that not all the school board members, nor all of the council members, felt the need to come to the joint meeting, which happens once a year.
Right.
Usually it's in city council chambers, but it's a meeting of all the school board members and all of the city council members, and not everybody was there. I watched it online, and I was really disappointed. I'm like, this is potentially really an important thing where potentially you can find ways to help each other.
Yeah. No, and I have good relationships with a number of the Board of Trustees there for Clovis Unified. I have the endorsement of David DeFrank, Clovis Unified board member. And in my conversation with Trustee DeFrank, we talked about the overlapping need where it comes to public safety, because they're looking to make sure that their campuses are safe environments for our students. And the city council has a role to play in making sure that that's possible. So again, the public safety issue is a nexus for so many things. And so of course that has to be the top priority. And there's so many different areas where there are those overlapping things. And so open lines of communication, absolute support, and being able to work on those types of issues together, recognizing again that it's not a jurisdiction question. This is our community. These are the people that we represent in different capacities, but we need to make sure that we are unified on the needs for those people and working together to make sure that they get the best out of this community.
Two of the contests are essentially uncontested.
Right.
Tiffany's an incumbent at Tiffany Stoker
Madsen.
Stoker Madsen. She's an incumbent, but nobody's running against her. And then there's another one she's on. Oh, what is her name?
Dina,
thank you.
Yeah, Dina Combs Flores.
I was just blanking.
Yeah, is
and
running
she's
unopposed in an open seat.
The interesting one to me is the Clovis West position.
Correct.
Which has Joanne Burton, Chuck Dermanuel, Clint Olivier,
Samantha Bauer.
I know two of them. At this point, I'm leaning. Of course, I'm not in that district because those are districts unlike city council.
Correct.
But my support is more towards Joanne Burton. But I don't know. I haven't decided completely, but I think so.
I think that I know Clint Olivier. I've known him for years. I've met Joanne, had a couple of conversations with her, and I don't really have a connection to the others. I know of Chuck Dermanuel from his brother. I have briefly met Samantha Bauer, but politics and campaigns and elections are so complicated because there's so many different aspects to it. So you have things like name ID, and in a race for a school district where the budgets aren't going to be there, you're not going to have, tens of thousands of dollars coming into these campaigns. It's not really going to be like that. How someone reaches the people with their message is critical, and getting that to the voters. And so whoever is going to be best at that is going to have the best shot at it. Clint Olivier has some name ID. I know he was endorsed by the Fresno County Republican Party. And again, the difficult thing about endorsements is it doesn't mean anything negative about the people who don't get them. Because I think Joanne, in the conversations I've had, I think she's fantastic. I think she's got a really good heart, and I think she's doing this for the right reasons. And so the fact that she didn't get that endorsement, I don't think that speaks negatively to her at all, or her conservatism, her Republican values, anything like that. It's just being aware that there's other aspects at play. And that can be really, really frustrating as a candidate.
The good thing about Clint Olivier is he's a pretty eloquent spokesman, and he's got a great kid.
Yeah.
Now, I love the thought that anybody that is on a school board has skin in the game, meaning he will have a kid in the district.
Yeah. And soon too.
And that's a great motivation.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So I told you where I was leaning, but I didn't actually say anything bad about it.
No, and I think that's the key. I'm not going to say anything bad about anybody who wants to throw their hat in the ring. I may question motives if I don't think someone's doing it for the right reasons. But to actually put yourself out there is really, really difficult. And campaigns are a roller coaster. I've had highs, I've had lows, and it takes a lot out of you, and it really challenges those kinds of things. So anybody who's willing to do that deserves respect. And I would never say anything negative about any of those individuals.
You're nicer than I am, and I'm not running for anything.
That's the thing,
I won't say if I believe that they truly believe in freedom and we have some basic agreement.
Yeah.
No, I didn't say total agreement at all.
Well, I'll disagree with them, and I will challenge their opinions, their stated positions, their votes, if that's the case. In the last round, obviously, I was running against two incumbents, and I did challenge what one of them had said publicly, they were quoted in the Clovis roundup as having said, and that's fair game. That's not a personal thing. That is, I don't think what you did and what you said is in the best interest of the people of Clovis, and I'm here to give them a choice.
And that's a fair way to deal with politics. It wasn't personal.
Right. You have to focus on the politics of it. It's not a personal thing. People can be good people and you can disagree with them. That's what we've lost in our society, right? Is the ability to disagree, but still be agreeable, and to be civil disagreement. And we need to get back to that, because we don't all have the same perspective. We don't all have the same experiences that lead us to our positions. And so if we can recognize that and still be respectful of people on that human level, but engage in debate, vigorous debate on issues, that's where we need to be.
Absolutely. I want to go ahead and shift. City Council has a lot to do with creating a plan for growth.
Yes.
Where do you see Clovis going, and what directions?
There's a lot of difficulty there. One thing is, we know Clovis has had a housing boom, right? You see rooftops all over the place. There's new development, new this. And a lot of that, I think, has been done well, in the sense that you have these different developments, like everybody talks about Loma Vista, which is kind of over in the Clovis East High School area. And they had certain markers where it's like, okay, once this is 60% built out, or once this is 80% built out, then we'll allow new development in this new Heritage Grove area, which is north of Shepherd, kind of Clovis Avenue. And so that makes sense. So you don't just have everything going everywhere, right? You have some planning to it. The challenge that Clovis has had is in having the retail and commercial development follow that residential development. Now, there's still people who want to have the debate over growth or not growth, who want to say, well, we shouldn't be growing this fast. We shouldn't be growing at all. The problem I have with that is I think that ship has sailed, because if you want to be a small town, if you want to be what would in that sense be like a bedroom community where everybody lives there, it's nice, white picket fences, all that kind of stuff, but you do all your shopping and everybody works in the town next door, which would be like Fresno. We would just be a suburb of Fresno. We're well past that point. I mean, we've got Sierra Vista Mall, we've got Clovis Community Hospital, you've got the medical school there. I mean, we're our own city. And so once we've gotten to that point, which we've been at now for a long, long time, this isn't a recent thing, right? Now we have to deal with that. And a city, a metropolis of sorts, right, has to have growth. So in my opinion, just the way that the city is, we've moved past that question.
Well, we're 125,000.
Yeah, we're 125,000 people. That's not a tiny little suburb where you can really manage those things. And the other thing is, too, when you're a bedroom community like that, your only real option for revenue is taxing yourselves. And again, we've grown beyond that. We now need economic growth. We need economic development, commercial development to expand the the revenues that are coming into the city so that we don't have to rely on taxing ourselves for things like public safety. Now, there can be situations where that's about your only option to address a serious issue. We do have an issue that has to be addressed with our police department and staffing and public safety. I'm not convinced that we're at the point where a public safety tax is the only possibility for that. I do think there could be other avenues if we really dig in, do the hard work to find out where other revenue streams could be. I know commercial development is something we have to pursue, and I know that there are people out there who own land, who want to bring in businesses to that land, but there's certain impediments at City Hall right now because they would have to front like $30 million for some of the infrastructure and things to make that land developable for commercial businesses.
So roads, sewers, electricity.
Bringing in all of those kind of city services. The city has had a policy and it makes sense in a lot of ways, but development pays its own way. Now, when you're talking about residential development, essentially that cost is just passed on to the home buyer. You know, the home builders have a mechanism in order to kind of absorb some of those costs and move forward and handle that. And so it hasn't really come into play as far as a question to be addressed. But again, I think there's some issues there. In commercial development, it doesn't really work that way because you don't have hundreds of home buyers that you can divvy that up and kind of spread it out, and makes it a little easier for a business owner to absorb that cost and move forward with that at the front end because there's more opportunities to get it on the back end. So when you're looking at commercial development, Clovis has some real challenges and I think some legitimate questions that need to be answered to see if that's somewhere that we can actually improve and bring in additional revenues to the city.
Well, it also concerns me that, you know, there are certain shopping centers in Clovis, which is a pretty happening place for the most part, where, you know, their anchor building's empty.
Right.
Like where Orchard Supply was. You know, the Salvation Army, that is what, Shaw and Villa.
So the city staff who I have encountered, and I've had the opportunity to engage with a number of them on different things, different commissions and things, are fantastic. They're really sharp people. They know their jobs. They do an excellent job. They are there to serve and they're fantastic. And so again, this has nothing to do with any individuals. They're really, really great. But again, I think there can be more work to be done to incentivize companies to come in. If you have a building like that, how is that outreach to these different companies that could come in and fill that need? I think there can be a more proactive approach to some of these things. I don't have the answers. I don't know what business would be perfect there, but I think the conversations need to happen and there needs to be more engagement. And again, a little more proactive, assertive approach in trying to answer some of these questions. And, you know, that retail and commercial development is really key to the new neighborhoods that are coming in too, because even where I live, there's not a ton of retail and that I'm still having to drive a distance to, you know, go grocery shopping, to, you know, take care of some of these needs. And so when we have those issues and those questions, we're always talking about, you know, transportation and traffic and all of this. So we want people to be able to do things closer to where they live. Well, then we have to pursue that retail and commercial development to enable those people in the new neighborhoods we're building all over the place to be able to do that.
The other big issue with development is the state has decided that we need affordable housing. And a top-down approach. I'm not saying we don't need it.
Right.
I'm saying the fact that they're not allowing communities to decide how, they're not giving us much leeway. How do you fight that? What do you do?
So there's a couple things. You know, one of the issues that I think is critical for Clovis is maybe second, maybe not second, to the phrase, the Clovis way of life. The favorite phrase in Clovis is local control. And that is seriously challenged by Sacramento at basically every turn, right? They want to control all of it. So if we're really going to try to protect and preserve that local control and frankly fight for our opportunity to do things for ourselves, we have to be creative about it. And I think there's two things we have to do. Number one, we have to recognize what I call political realities. And so I can hate the idea of this affordable housing till I'm blue in the face. That only works if I can actually keep it from coming, right? Yeah. The political reality is what's really best for the community of Clovis, I think, is to tackle that head on and say, okay, this is what you want me to do. Now I'm going to look at every single nook and cranny of this mandate and figure out if there's a way that I can abide by what you're asking me, comply with your mandate, but still do it in a way that's best for Clovis. So when it comes to affordable housing, you'll find out that you can choose to do it for specific groups like veterans, like seniors, like families who go through background checks. And so as an elected official, I can take that mandate that I'm not wild about, because I don't want any kind of mandates, right?
Right.
But I can take that and I can say, I'm going to do the hard work to figure out how to comply with this mandate, get Sacramento and Governor Newsom off our back over it, and still try and do it in a way that works for Clovis, that I can get the people through transparency and honesty about the process, really making sure people understand what's going on, to bring them along and say, look, we're still going to do this with some element of local control. We're going to do it for ourselves this way. And I think that's some of what's been missing it. I think politicians tend to prefer to kick the can down the road and not be the one who stands up and says, okay, I know you don't want an apartment building, but I'm going to bring you one. Nobody wants to be that. And so they'd rather try and just say, well, we're not going to do it right now. We're going to, zone for it, but we don't build. We don't build things. We're just a city council. We just allow for it. We plan for it.
Right.
But then what happens is when you're down the road and Sacramento says, but you haven't built anything, now we're going to force you to build this, and you're going to have to build this kind of one. Instead of being proactive and trying to address it for ourselves earlier on, you kick the can down the road and you lose all of your control, because now they come in, when it's talking about development, they call it by right, which means now somebody can come in and build whatever they want there. They don't have to get it approved by the planning department or the city council. There's no community input. It's completely out of our hands. And I don't want to see that, because that's the antithesis of local control.
My final thing that has to do with our state mandating things. Water's becoming an ever increasing issue.
Yeah.
We largely rely on city wells, and then we have a waste treatment plant. How do we improve that so that maybe we mitigate some of that problem so it doesn't hit us as hard as it's going to hit the whole Central Valley?
Yeah, so Clovis did some good things a while back with like the purple pipes, right? We did that water treatment plant. That was really good foresight in understanding that there are ways to kind of mitigate some of these issues. So the purple pipes recycle water, and that's for irrigation, landscaping, that kind of stuff. And so that has really alleviated some of the pressure on the system for our people, which is a fantastic thing. And it takes that kind of, again, creativity and foresight, assertive leadership to say, this is where we're headed and we're going to invest in this now. And that's really the difficult part, because when you're looking at anything from the state, the biggest issue is the funding that's attached to it. And that's why so often our elected officials, our leaders, are in a conundrum, frankly. I mean, it's not an easy situation. It's kind of a lose-lose, because if you push back against that, you're going to lose funding for your community. And then you're going to have to make that up somewhere. And there's only so many ways you can do that. And so I think you have to be able to separate those things out, push back on the things that require being pushed back on, and that the community is going to support and say, whatever it takes to keep that from happening, we're willing to do it, even if it means we have to pay more for it. And water is going to be one of those situations in our region that I think if we can come together as a region and look at it that way, we'll have better success.
Well, for instance, Temperance Flat is paid for. Sykes Reservoir is paid for. But no actions happened. I don't know quite what you do on that one, because we're in the minority.
We're in the minority, but Clovis is separate too, because we aren't, the rural communities. We don't have the same kind of issues. And so again, that's why I think we do need to look at it from a regional approach and continue to work with our partners. That's another thing that I think is really important is, I have good working relationships, personal friendships with our elected officials in other branches. I have personal relationships with our supervisors. I'm endorsed by Supervisor Nathan Magzig, by Supervisor Steve Brandow, by Supervisor Buddy Mendez, and I can work with them in that capacity for Fresno County, what's going to be best for Clovis, but in that county-wide deal. I have the endorsement of Assemblyman Jim Patterson. I've known him and his family for years and years and years, and so I can easily work with him on those issues. Same with State Senator Shannon Grove. I know her personally. And so being able to not just have the endorsement of those people and recognize that we can work together, not just for Clovis, but the impacts of how Clovis is governed go beyond our city borders. And we need a conservative voice in this region to strengthen, like you were mentioning earlier, Gary Bredefeld needs help,
Yes.
right? And if I can be a conservative voice in Clovis, that can strengthen his position in Fresno. And if we're all working together for the betterment of our region, that's only going to amplify Clovis's voice in those processes.
We're going to go ahead and take another break.
Mhm.
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. When we come back, I just kind of wanted to go over a little bit of local control and state and a little bit about the Constitution before we end up with some hope and solutions.
Sounds good to me.
We're ready to roll. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Clovis City Council candidate Diane Pearce. There are 3 spots, so it's the top 3 move forward. And I'm hopeful that this happens for you, Diane.
Well, thank you. I am too.
Our community needs it.
Well, thank you. You know, it really is about the community. And one of the things when people ask me, why are you doing this? You know, part of it is that idea that I look at what's going on in our country and I think we're absolutely heading in the wrong direction. And then you look at our state and, you know, a lot of us feel like our state is a dumpster fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Clovis is still special. And Clovis is a place where I feel I can still have an impact and make a positive difference and, you know, kind of push back on some of the stuff that's going on in Sacramento and that. And so again, it is that question of local control. Can I impact my community in a positive way and kind of stave off some of the things that we see going on at other levels?
Well, I see a lot of politicians and they said, well, you know, the Board of Health told me, the state told me.
Right.
And they use that as their excuse rather than trying to lead. And I want to point out that, for instance, the city of Atwater declared itself a sanctuary city for COVID.
Right.
And during this whole COVID experience, the city of Atwater grew and all the surrounding communities didn't.
Right.
And they didn't worry about what consequences were going to come from the state. They stood strong.
Mm-hmm.
And the state didn't do anything.
Yeah.
The state, so there's this big worry, but that's not the only place that happened.
Right.
That also happened a little bit in Kalinga. That happened in with Kirk Uhler, what is that? Placer County.
Placer County, yeah. They were one of the big counties that really stood up.
Right. So, you know, this boogeyman of the state will get me and I'll lose my funding. If it's a truly important issue, politicians need to stand and they need to listen to their local communities. And that's a large part of why I went to so many Clovis Unified meetings, because they were imposing all of the COVID things that the state told them to and kept saying, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, other school districts are telling the state no, and they're not suffering consequences.
Right.
What are you doing? And I like pretty much everybody on the Clovis School Board.
Right.
Nonetheless, I thought they were weak and they needed to be stronger.
Sure.
I think a relationship between the city council, who was stronger than they were, would have helped.
Right. Again, you have to support each other. And I think sometimes those different groups felt like they were isolated and, you know, really were pressed to follow those mandates because, again, they were afraid of losing that funding. And that's always a difficult position to be in. I tell people when it comes to local control and pushing back against the state, you really have 3 options. One of those is just rolling over in weak compliance and telling your constituents your hands are tied. It's like, they're making me do this. I don't have a choice. The second one is, like those other places did, to just say no. And frankly, Bob Whalen is about to take a seat as a judge on the Superior Court because he said no. Governor Newsom came in and said, no, you're not going to be on the ballot. I'm going to appoint someone to that judgeship. And Bob Whalen, through a legal channel, said, not so fast. I don't think that's correct. And he was successful in that. And so he's going to be a judge now because he told Governor Newsom not so fast. Because what happens when you do that is a lot of times that, I'll call it a bully, okay? Governor Newsom was a bully and is a bully in these things. You tell the bully no, and the bully's going to say, okay, I think this guy's going to be a little easier to get at. And you go for the low-hanging fruit. You go for the easier targets. And so if you stand up and say no, they realize it's going to take some effort to really push you in the direction they want to go. And maybe they don't want to exercise that effort. And so you can give yourself some leeway there. And then again, you can take them to court. You can sue the state, and that isn't a guaranteed solution because the state wields a lot of power if you're trying to go against them. And maybe ultimately you won't be successful, but that case can wind through the court for years and years and years.
Mhm.
And you've at least given your community some time to A, not be impacted by whatever it is you're fighting against, and B, you buy some time to figure out what you may be able to do to manage it if the end result isn't in your favor. And so there's still ways to push back, take a strong stand, and at least give yourself time to navigate to where you can deal with it more appropriately. And that's what the school district really didn't give themselves a chance to do, was to figure it out. Everything happened so fast. It was crazy. And it was a lot easier to just say, okay, we're just going to roll with it and try and make the best of it.
Well, and I think their lawyers and their superintendent, who are good people,
Right.
They were so worried about losing the funding, they couldn't see anything else.
And I wonder, too, if there had really been an understanding at the outset that this was going to drag on for years and impact our children so significantly, not just for a few months, but for multiple school years. I wonder if maybe they wouldn't have had more resolve to push and fight hard at the beginning. Because once you've gone down that road of saying, okay, we'll shut down for the rest of this school year, but we'll pick it back up, you've already lost ground and you're back on your heels. And so it's going to be a lot harder to wrest that control back when you've given it away, even for a short period of time.
We're down to about 3.5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
So I don't know that we're going to get to the Constitution much.
Okay.
I
support it.
It's not a living document?
Right. No, it's a living document, absolutely. But it is, I call it flexible. It's like, because the way the founders wrote it was so brilliant. When you go back and look at it, it had flexible specificity. I don't know that that's a word, but that's what I call it, because it applies to every single thing. You don't have to change it. You can go by exactly how it's written.
And there is an amendment process, but it's not like, oh, well, we get a different judge and we can interpret it this way today.
It's not willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I want to point out that in a 5-year span, we had 3 amendments. 13th of which abolished slavery, 14th which talked about securing citizens' rights, and 15th which I believe gave African Americans men the right to vote.
Yeah.
Now, imperfect, because I noticed I just said men.
Right.
Nonetheless, what a beautiful document. I think the most precious document written outside of religious texts.
Yeah. No, again, the brilliance of how it was put together and crafted to where over the decades and now centuries, it has stood the test of time and can still be applied with strict interpretation, that we don't have to try and, you know, people talk about the Second Amendment and they're like, oh, well, if you want it to be strict interpretation, then you can only have muskets. It's like, oh my gosh, don't be like that. there is that flexibility written into it. And so we don't have to mess with that. We don't have to worry about that.
Yep. Well, we're down to about 2 minutes.
Okay.
I love to end with hope and solutions. So before you start that, give your website and ways to contact you.
Absolutely. It's all Diane, the number 4 Clovis. So website is diane4clovis.com. Email is diane4clovis@gmail.com. And again, Facebook is facebook.com/diane4clovis with the number 4. And you can find all of my endorsements. I listed some of them. I'm also really proud to have the support of Sheriff Margaret Mims, Sheriff-elect John Zanoni. Again, we've talked so much about public safety. I think that's really critical.
So why are you hopeful?
I am hopeful because, again, I think that we can make a difference locally. And that's why I'm doing this, because I think we can protect the Clovis way of life. We can preserve some of that local control, maintain our public safety at a high standard. It's just going to take people who are committed and willing to do the hard work. And that's why I'm here. I am a conservative leader with a proven track record in the community of working really hard for these things. And I just want to take it to a different level.
Well, we're down to about a minute. I think all those are very important things. I'm hopeful because the fact is I'm religious. And that gives me a hope.
Yeah.
It makes me think beyond my normal humanity that there is something greater and that we need to strive for it.
Yeah. There's a freedom in that too, because, you know, I look at this and I feel like God has called me to this journey, but he hasn't guaranteed an end result. And so I don't have to worry about that part because it's in his hands. And so as we fight for our values, as we continue to maintain that hope, we still have the freedom to know that it's in God's hands. and
Yeah.
he's in control.
Absolutely. Website one more time.
Absolutely. Diane, the number 4 Clovis, that's DIANE, the number 4 Clovis.com.
Well, Diane, I absolutely wish you the best as we wind down. I hope that people look at your website. I know you will need volunteers to help you out.
Yep.
And it's an opportunity to get involved for a candidate that I truly believe in.
Well, thank you. That really means a lot. And that's another reason I'm hopeful is people like you who are out there doing those grassroots efforts, getting people together and really having those conversations, because that's where we win hearts and minds, is engaging with people on that personal level.
Well, that is a wrap. I thank you. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, are on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.